Would you be shocked to learn that a bunch of recovering alcoholics and addicts would like to rent the house next door to you? But the homes themselves are run by the residents, all of them former drunks and addicts, like these men in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. What Oxford House gives them, they say, is time.
We said that once you got into this house, you could live there the rest of your life if you didn't drink, didn't use drugs, and paid your weekly share of expenses.
Those were the three key rules?
Those were the three key rules.
Hi, this is Mitchell Braddock. This is going to be my summer learning project, I guess. I'm looking at it more as a thoughtful project, and kind of how taking this course has kind of reframed what I consider development, especially now that I'm in middle age. So I'm going to talk a bit about Oxford House and what brought me to the moment where I'm here now in this class. In August of 2021, I found myself here in the great city of Madison, Wisconsin. You may have heard of that. At the very end of one last epic spin out, I was really kind of at that moment where you have to, choose whether you're going to, live or die. Not all of us have the benefit of being faced with that in such a slow motion train wreck, where there's something that can be done to either switch the track or get off the train. But I was very fortunate that, I had some good support around me. So I got out of DC3, which if you're unfamiliar, Dr. Mikael is a crisis center here. In fact, it's called Dane County Crisis Center. That's the 3 C's is County Crisis Center. And I spent a little over 2 weeks there, just trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, whether I was going to spend it, drinking myself to death, or if I was going to, somehow magically, set down the booze and do something different. So I exited the facility, and I was fortunate enough that my mother gave me one last chance to do something different. After years of my parents just trying to help me out, they were at the end of their rope. Here I am, 39 years old, and for all intents and purposes, a lost cause in many people's eyes, including probably my own. I needed to find some place to live that wasn't, my mother's spare room. And, she's like, well, there's these sober houses in town. And I had gone to Recovery Road in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with a pretty mixed bag of results. I really couldn't fathom living underneath this guy, and my roommates were terrible, and it was just a wild experience that I really just didn't want to relive. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to apply to Oxford, and I'm going to maybe give it a better try, and maybe things will be different this time. I interviewed, and I got accepted into Jordan House, which is on the east side of Madison here. And, I walked into the interview, and, the guy who was president of the house is wearing a sideways ball cap, and, he's kind of got longish hair, and he's very much yeah, man, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, well, maybe I will make it here. Maybe there's hope. So they voted me into the house because it's all Democratic there. Everything gets voted on. So I got another chance, at least on life. What I did different this time is I took therapy seriously, which was very good. One of the rules in the house is that you have to do 3 recovery-related activities a week. And I am not a big fan of AA, and all of the guys there went to either AA or DAA or NA or pick an A. And I just wasn't real keen on it. I didn't know anybody in town here. It's one of the reasons I moved back here was, the whole people, places, and things thing. I didn't really want to get to know new people because, like, I had been through so much, pain and suffering at the hands of others for so long that it's like, if I'm just going out and meeting new broken people, like, I'm either going to fall back into my old broken habits or I'm going to take on new broken habits from my new friend group because, that's kind of how we are as people. You start hanging out with a group of people and you just do what everybody else is doing. And I just didn't want that for myself this time around. I wanted to make some real meaningful change in my attitude and how I viewed the world. And, a lot of it was I wanted to get rid of that whole victim mentality, the woe is me, the, this is everybody else's fault. Like, my biggest lesson that I felt like I needed to learn was how to take some sort of accountability and responsibility myself. So my roommates were, pretty awesome in that they let me do my 2 therapy sessions that I was doing a week as 2 of my things, but then they were really, really insistent that I like come out with them to these things, and I'm just like, I'd go and I'm like, this is dumb and I hate it. And so we're about 3 weeks in and the Oxford chapter meeting happens. And so what the chapter is it's kind of like an oversight committee, if you will. It's all of the houses get together with some representation, and we make a decision what we're doing as a community, as a group of houses. And in the state of Wisconsin, there are 3 chapters. There's chapter 1, which is the Madison area chapter of Oxford House, and there's Milwaukee Oxford House, which I'm wearing their T-shirt today to represent a little bit. And then there's the outlying chapter 3, which in my experience with the state is just they don't communicate. They just kind of it's 12 houses that are scattered across the state that just they don't really communicate with each other and just kind of stay autonomous, which is fine, because it seems to be working for them, which that's all you can ask for in a pure ran system. There is a Oxford Inc., which is the big nationwide, worldwide group that kind of that's hard to explain. They give out chapters. They give out the tax ID numbers for the houses. So all the houses are chartered with them and then with the federal government as autonomous entities, and they do the financial backing of lawyers and stuff like that when you run into stuff with cities or other planning commissions and la 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 la. And I didn't know that any of that existed, and so I'm taken to this chapter meeting, and the guy who had been the chair of the chapter had been doing it for 2.5 years and was extremely burned out. He was pretty over it. And my roommate who had taken me there, which was the same roommate with the sideways ball cap, he goes, well, if you're not trying to go to meetings, maybe you should get involved with chapter. And then he kind of voluntold me, if you will, to become the chapter chair of the Madison area Oxford House. And I went, well, I mean, how bad could it be? How bad indeed. So when you're the chapter chair, you're kind of making sure that all the houses are kind of following the rules. You're making sure that everybody's on the same page, how money is getting spent, what our presence looks like in the community, to law enforcement, to our neighbors and our families and all this other stuff. It's it's an administrative role. So I made it a point while I was doing that to start going to all the houses at least once a month. And at first I got a lot of resistance because, it's autonomous and every single house is its own thing. And, we don't want chapter coming in here and telling us what to do. And, at first I was very like, well, no, you're going to do it this way because this is what the manual says. This is how we're supposed to do it. And, I butted with a lot of heads, but it kind of opened my eyes that there's more to this system of us helping each other out than just, holding each other's hand at a meeting or answering the phone when somebody needs help or is in crisis. There's this whole machine on the backside that nobody really sees that keeps the thing running. And it kind of changed seeing that in the peer system of Oxford, like I could be voted into a position and then, after doing it for a while and becoming more pragmatic about it, people seeing, the results across the chapter, all of a sudden, a lot of people had trust that I would do the right thing and I would maintain stability and I would, talk to all these, inpatient places. And as I started doing that, I started doing outreach. So then all of a sudden, I'm going into these places once a month. I'm going, well, minus Rogers, because Rogers just, they have their own houses and they send their people there. But, going into Tellurian, going into Five Door, going into ARC, going into Attic, these programs to help people with drug charges, do something different. Something that's not quite so supervised, where you're beholden to roommates and, the community and not to a PO. And I think that's helpful for a lot of people. And when I first started doing it, it felt really good. You'd get people in the houses and these, oh, thank you so much. You're so awesome. And I can't, and you start to get this sense of ego about it almost, where it's oh, I know who would fit where, and I know this, that, and the other thing. And then a few months go by and, these people relapse or they steal from their roommates. And then all of a sudden you're well, you start questioning your reality again. You're well, do I know what I'm doing? Do I have the right plan? What is the purpose here? So that in itself, after, that came about after about a year of doing it, where, you start getting turnover again and you're well, did I start making this about me again? Did I start turning it into a selfish thing? And you're asking yourself this question because you want to be doing the right thing by the community, but you also, the goal is to heal, right? The goal is to figure out where you're going with it. Yeah, so, I had to start not taking it so personally, and I had to start, having that little pep talk with myself, hey man, you can help these people get to a place, but you can't help them make decisions past that. They have to make these decisions for themselves. And it kind of puts you in that mindset where it's oh yeah, I had to make that decision for me too. So there was kind of this moment where I stopped kind of holding people's hands. I stopped being so much of a cheerleader as I was a facilitator. And then that led to me getting hired in at a residential facility here in town, which will remain unnamed for the moment, which was a whole nother experience upon itself. And that one, I stepped a little bit back from Oxford because I felt it was a conflict of interest for me to, take that job and help these people who are in residential treatment, and then be the one who's helping them get into, Oxford House, because it made me feel like I would be funneling and picking before these houses had a chance to vote or decide for themselves. I still to this day think that was the correct decision. But as soon as I didn't work at that facility anymore, I wanted to get back involved. I kind of felt like that had been missing out of my life. So I went back to the chapter, since they were still calling me anyway. I had all the contacts and the phone numbers. And I said, hey, well, let's create this position that other states have. A lot of other states have this. Most notably, like Kentucky and Texas are huge with Oxford House, and they do a really good job of, keeping alumni, in the program. And so I went back and I'm like, hey, let's create an alumni committee. I can be the chair of that committee, and that will allow me to, keep some, credibility with you guys, stay beholden to the message, and it also will allow me to keep some credibility in the community and keep working kind of behind the scenes to try to, make the community better in Oxford's name. And so they agreed to that, and shortly thereafter, I actually got invited to be part of the Dane County Sober Living Coalition on behalf of Oxford. So it kind of came full circle in the community service, and I'm really proud to serve on that board. Some of the things that I've gotten to do because of that, are just amazing. I've had breakfast with the Assistant Chief of Police of Madison, the director of the CARES program here. These people know Oxford as, well, oh, it's sober living. Well, okay, what does that mean? To a lot of people, that means different things. Oh, it's just a bunch of addicts living in a house, la la la. It's really, I think it's healthy for the community. It's healthy for people in those positions to meet somebody who's like, grown up and mature and can have like a real intelligent conversation with them about the needs of the community and what Oxford House is supposed to mean. And also explain that since it's peer ran, it doesn't always go that way, but this is what it is supposed to stand for. And giving these assurances that we are working diligently to maintain that standard. I couldn't be prouder of what I've done and what I've helped create here, what I've helped maintain here when it comes to the sober living community here in Madison. It's amazing. It's a point of pride, and it's a point of joy. A lot of people just go in, and the best they can manage is to just put their life back together, maybe get their kids, get their own apartment. And great, how wonderful is that? How wonderful and meaningful is it that they could change their life so much that their children could be brought back into it, and that they could have their own apartment, and that they could live a life where you're not chained to a bottle of alcohol or a needle or, a pipe. It's amazing. And I'm fortunate that was my case as well. But I'm also extremely fortunate that I could give more than that, because not everybody can. And, a lot of people will ask me, well, why do you do this? And I'm like, it's not, I don't get paid for any of it. It's all volunteer work. I do it because, it's a need in the community. I was afforded this wonderful opportunity. And if we as a community don't continue to support it, then nobody will have this opportunity behind us. And I think that's really, that's why I do it, is the whole pay it forward thing. I'm not a big fan of the 12 steps, but that's the 12th step, is to, send that message of hope down the road, man. And, if I can look back, and for as many people that I helped that didn't make it, I can see, another 2 or 3 that did. And that makes all of it worth it. It makes all of it worth it. It makes the community better. It makes me better. And it empowers people to make themselves better. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Relating that to development, I was a pretty sad, selfish guy when I got to Oxford House. I was probably a dry drunk. I was still mad that I couldn't drink. It didn't seem fair. It didn't seem fair at all. That I had to have this problem. And did I really have a problem, or did everybody else just have a problem with the way, with how much I drank? And, getting the opportunity to go and become part of the chapter and become something more than just, a member of the house. It changed my perspective on it so much. It wasn't about me. None of these people were telling me I could never drink again. You can drink again. You just know what's going to happen if you do. And it's like, oh, well, crap, you're right. I do. It's not that I drink. It's my behavior when I drink. Okay. Who's in control of the behavior? Well, I am, but not if you're drinking. Okay. Well, are you in control over whether or not you drink? Thank you, Albert Ellis, right? Yeah. No, and therein lies the rub, right? It was always a me problem. It was my perspective on, allowing myself to feel like things were happening to me instead of acknowledging my role in them. And I don't know that without my experience becoming chapter chair and like going through all of the weird trials and tribulations that I did with that would have gotten me to the same place that I am now, where I don't even, remotely think about drinking as an option. It doesn't cross my mind even on the crappiest of days. How wonderful is it? How wonderful is it that I was afforded this opportunity? How wonderful is it that I get to help others have this opportunity afforded them? How fantastic is that? I could have never imagined that I would, grow in a way where I could see the bright side of things instead of everything always being so rainy and down. I never thought I could see a day where I could grow into an understanding of how my own brain works in ways that I can manipulate or trick myself into feeling certain ways, mostly not to just be sad all the time. How wonderful is that? You posed a question in class. Can you teach morality? Can you unlearn amoral behaviors? I immediately typed in the chat no. But I've thought about it since then. I think about things often, and I go over them over and over again in my head. And I think that maybe, I don't know that I was ever really like amoral, but perhaps I was unscrupulous. And I think that my time and experience with Oxford House and doing all of this service work and all of this stuff in the community has given me back a sense of pride where I can't imagine lying. I can't imagine stealing. I mean, there's no reason to. Everything we need is right here in our community with each other. And so, did I relearn morals there? Or, is it that with a change of perspective, my moral compass changed? I don't know. But I think that the question is more dynamic and complex than just yes or no. Can you relearn morals? I think that when you change what's important to you, when you change your hierarchy of values, if you will, you start to understand things differently, and things that once seemed okay no longer seem okay. So I think that's my answer to that question as well. I know you wanted these kind of brief, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I think that I will add a short explanation from the news of what Oxford House is. But I think that yeah, I think that what I learned this summer from your class was that my perspective on what Oxford House has meant to me is more developmental than what I understood it to be. You know, I always looked at it as something where, you know, I'm doing the right thing for the community, and as long as I keep doing the next right thing, everything is going to be okay in my life. And what it has actually done is it has developed me from an alcoholic to a mature community leader. And by golly, that's amazing. At least I think so. As a special treat, after this, I will go through my hat collection, because I know that you are a man of many hats. Well, let me tell you something. So am I. So am I. But other than that, I think that I'm going to wrap this up. Wish me luck editing. Have a wonderful day.
Folks who are not alcoholics and who are not drug addicts will never be able to understand why somebody like me has to drink until the bottle's empty. But what you can do is to get people who are not alcoholics and drug addicts to understand that, like the prodigal son, they can come back into the community and function well if society will let them back into the community.
This is going to be magically edited, Mitchell. Do good work. I believe in you.